This is Seata Thompson, and this is the Roundtable. We're meeting today with Broward County Sheriff Wayne Clark and my co-host Sean Alexis is available to join us on the call today, or Shane, pardon me, Shane Alexis.
Sean, you had it right the first time. You're doing good.
All right, man. Apologize.
It's okay.
Overthinking it. But yeah,
you're not the first one.
Passing it off to you.
All right. How you doing today, Sheriff?
Well, not Sheriff yet. Got a couple of months, but it's close. Getting close. Hopefully.
All right. Well, just giving you a little encouragement there.
Absolutely.
How's everything been going?
It's good. Everything's going well. It's a busy time. I still work professionally. Running a campaign is becoming more than a full-time. I see is that your son?
Yeah, that's my son there.
But it's busy. It's a lot of work. Broward County is a huge county, over 2 million people. I think Broward County is probably one of the most diverse counties in the entire state of Florida. I actually think Broward County is more diverse than Miami-Dade, but just so many different communities and different leaders and different, organizations. It's busy. It's a lot. Until you actually do this, until you get out and you actually talk to Broward County, you don't realize it. And to be honest with you, 15 months ago, I would have never thought there were so many different communities, and there's communities within communities. So it's interesting, and I love it. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy living in Broward County is, you get whatever type of atmosphere that you want to be around, for lack of a better way of saying it. You can go and enjoy another culture easily. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Now, as far as like the purpose of this, me and you and Seata, while we're on this call, the direction is we want to build alliances with both Republicans and Democrats, because ultimately I don't want to end up like the federal level where we're like kind of at a standstill, because you cannot pass laws or rules only having one side of the field, whether Republican or Democrat, so ultimately these may be tougher, things that might be a little edgy, but ultimately it's to get you on our side, or at least to get you to see our perspective on, what's going on as far as police brutality and the view of minorities. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, what is your view on have you seen the UPS, I'm sure you have, the shooting of the UPS driver, Frank Ordonez, I think I'm saying his name correct, where he was driving on a route and he got hijacked by two individuals who had a gun, and then it ended in tragedy where he was ultimately shot, along with a 50-year-old gentleman that was a car length down and the two robbers. Now, what is your view on that? I just want to get your perspective on that situation, and what do you think could have been done differently, or did you think the officers did it correctly, did the best that they could?
So I assume you're talking about the one that was almost a year ago. Maybe this week might be the 1-year anniversary, right? The one that ended on 75, where, was there one individual killed or multiple? I know the actual.
There were two. It was two individuals killed. A 50-year-old male that was about 3 car lengths ahead of the UPS truck. There was the UPS driver, as well as the two. So the way that situation played out was kind of interesting, because it went for such a far distance, from the point of where the robbery took place all the way to where basically it came to 5 o'clock traffic, and then the officers proceeded to open fire on the vehicle. They said there was about 200 rounds fired into the vehicle by the BSO and other officers on the scene. What do you think could have been done differently, or how do you see that scene from your perspective as an officer, the way that played out?
First of all, I have to go back and look. I don't think BSO responded to that particular incident. It's possible that they could. One of the things that concerns me the most about the way law enforcement, fire, EMS, and things work in Broward County is on the communications level. The communication system we found out was broken at the airport incident, and then even more so with MSD, and hasn't been fixed since. We actually had a deputy about a year ago that was killed in a drunk driving accident where a drunk driver slammed into him, alleged drunk driver slammed into him, and the radio communications broke down then as well. So one of the things that needs to happen in Broward County is to fix the communications. From what I remember of that incident, I was actually at a baseball field in Plantation coaching that night, I believe, if it's the same incident. And I remember hearing, multiple jurisdictions responding. It seemed like a very, very large amount of rounds fired in a short period of time with a whole lot of innocent individuals, right? 75 is a busy road. It's one of those things to where if someone is committing a felony and they're fleeing and they're not, putting someone else's life in risk, we can get them later. Now if it's a situation where the individuals are firing out of the UPS truck at random cars, then there's got to be a different protocol. One of the problems I think that has led BSO to get to where it is today is a lack of training. Under the Sheriff Israel administration, it was no training. Gregory Tony, it's like 100 miles an hour training. So there needs to be somewhere in between. We also need to work on better communication between the other agencies. If you talk to some of the other agencies throughout South Florida, they don't trust BSO. They don't believe BSO is going to do a good job and do it properly. And that's because of failed leadership at BSO. It's not because of the men and women at BSO, it's because of failed leadership. And so when you have those interjurisdictional car chases or hijackings, whatever you want to call them, there's got to be communications. There was recently one a month or so ago here in Broward where Fort Lauderdale police were behind a guy in a Jeep. FHP took over, ran him over, the Jeep flipped over, ended without any incident. So, with regard to the UPS, I'm not sure who fired all those rounds, but it certainly on its face sounds very egregious. It sounds like a lot of rounds, but, I wasn't involved in the investigation. I don't have all the facts, but I definitely think that when you're in that situation with the public surrounding you, you've got to look out for the public safety, because that's what we're there for, right? It's public safety, community safety. It's not, we should never put the public in danger. And if we're shooting or firing 200 rounds into a vehicle unnecessarily, then we're putting the citizens in danger.
Absolutely. So what some people were saying was one of the options was just to let the criminal go and then catch him ultimately at a stop. Do you agree that some of the family members and different other people said that, hey, look, why not just let them go and then we'll catch them once they go somewhere, because they have to stop. We can follow them with a helicopter or something like that. Do you think that would have been a reliable option, or do you think that's not something that would have been possible in that kind of situation?
Yeah, look, I don't know all the facts. I think that if you have someone, look, there are different protocols and different rules in place now, different times of when you chase and when you don't chase. We're in 2020. We should have the technology and the capabilities of tracking people without having to undergo high-speed chases. Like you said, there's helicopters, there's different forms of technology to chase these people. If they are leaning out of the UPS truck, firing at innocent individuals, that's one thing. If they're not, then you have a for lack of a better way of chasing, but you monitor them, like you said, until they stop, and then you can apprehend them the right way. Again, they had a hostage. I'm not 100% sure, who was firing at who, and I'll be more than happy to look at it because it does interest me. I remember seeing it, I remember hearing about it. I remember just to myself thinking, wow, that's a lot of rounds. I wonder what happened.
So, with that being said about the rounds being shot and the victims, being a hostage, the Supreme Court justice said, a Supreme Court justice said that there's the kind of personality or feeling of shoot first, ask questions later type of police style that's going on right now in America, not just Broward County, but like that is sort of like the personality that's been developed by police officers. Do you think that excessive force needs to be addressed? Do you think that issue needs to be addressed legislatively, I should say, or do you think that because a lot of people say it should be retraining, but what in West Palm Beach, for example, Frank Castle was shot inside of his vehicle after there was police training and different stuff like that. He called the police because he had a flat tire or whatever. Police were called on him while he was pulled over. The police were obviously trained very well. He was shot because, racial profiling. That's ultimately what it boiled down to. So what is to say that the retraining of police officers is going to be effective? Or why do you think police retraining is going to be effective to stem police brutality?
Well, look, I think you're still talking, but I don't hear you, though. It looks like your mouse moving.
Oh. Hang
okay.
on.
Okay.
Hang on. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah. Okay,
sorry. It was probably muted. What I was saying was police brutality is still an issue, and a lot of people say retraining is not enough. But issues like the Frank Castle case, where he was shot in West Palm Beach, racially profiled by the officer, and then ultimately shot. The officer was then fired. Blah blah blah. Now they say retraining works, but in West Palm Beach, they have a retraining program and different things in place to try to make sure the officers are well vetted. Why would your retraining be any different than what's already in place?
You have to look at
your retraining be any different than done.
Yeah, no, you have to look at, one of the things that I bring to the table is that, I have no bias. I've never been a law enforcement officer. I'm ex-military, and I have, business experience. So I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And what I can tell you is that when you look at this from the outside in, and then I have a lot of advisors, I have an advisory board made up of current, former, state, federal law enforcement, as well as mental health professionals and various others. And when you talk as a group together, one of the things that we're lacking is mental health assessments, mental health training. Law enforcement officers see the worst of the worst, the bad of the bad most of the time, whether it's an armed robbery, homicide, murder, horrific car accident, And so what we need to do is we need to look at mental health issues. We need to look at, the culture of the agency. We can't have a leader who is an aggressive leader and take no hostages by all means and run in and storm buildings, right? We need to do it from a logical standpoint. And so you need to for the current employees of the agency, you also need to make sure that if someone's on the SWAT team, that they have that right mentality and they fit in. If you have someone that's on road patrol, that they have the right mentality, they fit into there. One of the things that I would like to see implemented is a peer review or peer comment type program. Because look, we all when you went to high school, I went to high school, we all went to school. We all knew who if you wanted to do something, you knew who was the good people, who were the bad people, who were the agitators, who was likely to start a fight, who was likely to sell drugs or deal drugs, or who was likely to skip school. Whatever it is, right? Because you talk to your friends at school, everybody knows. We need a way of making sure that we can identify those officers that have extremely high reports of excessive use, extremely high numbers of issues. You've got to be able to track it. You've got to be able to look into it, and you've got to be able to address it. And you've got to have an ability to where the people that work for you or work under you trust the process, trust that they can go and have conversations about mental health and they're not going to get in trouble. Trust that they can have conversations about someone on the force that they feel like maybe has some tendencies to use excessive force. When it comes to the new individuals, you want to have a real human resources department that help you screen those individuals. And I think, you have to go into the communities and you have to encourage people in the communities to apply, and you have to encourage openness to be able to communicate one another, to be able to try to prevent those things. Because, if you are, if you're murdering someone solely based on race, that's not right. You need to be, that needs to be addressed. That needs to be fixed. And so, is it something that can be weeded out overnight? Absolutely not. Is it something that can be fixed today? No, it's going to take some time, but you got to have a leader that's dedicated to making positive change and looking at how to fix things. You can't just in an election cycle say you're going to do something. You get elected on November 3rd, and then for 3.5 years, you do nothing. You've got to have somebody that's going to come in there willing to work with the communities, willing to work with the deputies, willing to look at the hiring, the training, and the mental health aspects.
All right. So according to the, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
If I can jump in here. 2 questions. One is the unions, where we've heard it's been a challenge to get bad cops out because of the way the unions work. That just even on the Zoom call we were on Friday, Sheriff Tony was saying he's had fired several people, and somehow they end up showing back up on the force once they, get with their union rep and they're basically forced back onto the force. How would you get around that, or how would you work with the unions on teaming up to clean up the bad actors? Because it makes it hard. That's some of the issue, where if there's 10 bad apples, as we say, but 50 people know about it, you know what I mean? And we can't get those 10 people out. What good is the 50 other people?
Look, in law enforcement, where you're having people making split-second decisions, you can't have one bad apple, right? You've got to make sure you do your best to make sure there are no bad apples, because you're having someone make a split-second decision. You've got to be able to hire and train people with good judgment. You've got to be able to show them what good judgment is. With regard to the unions, one of the breakdowns at BSO currently is that the current administration has not reached out to the union heads. Unions are there. They serve a purpose to protect the deputies. One of the things that I've done already, and I will continue to do when elected, is to reach out and have those conversations with the union heads, to have them come up to have them come to the table. One of the issues with excessive force cases is that it takes a very, very long time to go through the process. It can take 18, 36 months. There needs to be some type of time limit put in there, some kind of time frame. That needs to be addressed. There's also the Officers' Bill of Rights. So, there's a number of different things. But you look, I can tell you this, and having conversations with the union representatives that I spoke to, they don't want bad apples either. They don't want people that are there that give them bad names, because look, they're officers as well, right? They're deputies as well. So they don't want that. And they're there to protect their members, and I understand that. But you have to have that uncomfortable conversation. Kind of like you said, Sean. If we're not adult enough to have those uncomfortable conversations, then we probably shouldn't be doing what we're doing, right? If I can't have that uncomfortable conversation with a union leader or with someone in the agency, I should probably not be running for election. Sean, if you can't have those uncomfortable conversations with me, you probably shouldn't be interviewing people, right? So you've got to have that ability to have those conversations, me being a lawyer and not biased toward law enforcement, I think in negotiating those contracts when they come up, negotiating those rights and negotiating those policies and procedures, I'm going to be able to do it. I'm not going to rely on a team of other lawyers or team of individuals to negotiate something and give it to me, final draft, and just sign off. It's very important to me to make sure that, the public sees that, we're trying to move forward. We're trying to make positive change every day. With the unions also, you've got to have a way to, there are different review boards. There are different, avenues like, judges and juries. One of the things that Sean brought up last week was the lack of prosecution of individuals from BSO. And I don't remember the year you gave, Sean. I think it was 1980 or something like that.
It was actually 1980. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that has to happen in Broward County is whoever leads the agency's also got to be able to work with the state attorney. And because the state attorney is ultimately the one prosecuting, the bad apples or prosecuting those that aren't fit to be there. And so you've got to have that open line of communication. For the first time, and I believe it's 44 years, I know it's 40 plus years, Broward County is going to have a new state attorney. And whoever that state attorney is, you've got to be able to work with them from the sheriff's office standpoint to be able to know, A, what they're going to prosecute, and B, how they're going to prosecute things. And, if we need to bring in other investigators to investigate certain crimes, then we need to do that. We need to open it up to be able to make sure that it's there. Also, there's a transparency between the union and the sheriff's department and the outside public. Transparency is huge. I don't think there's enough transparency there. I think I saw last month there was a gentleman that had an incident at the airport, and it took a local Sun Sentinel reporter flushing it out before the family ever got any answers as to what happened and why that guy died at the airport. It shouldn't have to wait to the news to call out the agency. The agency should have transparency.
Understood. Thank you for that. Sir, one thing I want to go back a bit. You mentioned that you're an attorney and then you have a background in the military. So what makes you feel like you're qualified to even run for sheriff?
Well, so I get asked that all the time. And that's a very simple question. I promise you that I know more about the law than anybody in that agency. As a lawyer, that's what I do every day. I've had more legal training than anybody in the Department of Law Enforcement. So it can't be lack of knowledge of the law. From a business standpoint, I've handled, Fortune 500 company budgets, administrative issues, policies and procedures, training. And by the way, BSO is more than just law enforcement. In fact, the actual largest line item for BSO is the Department of Detention. BSO touches every citizen in Broward County one way or another, from the seaport to the airport, detention, to the jails, which is detention, to the courthouse, which are the bailiffs, to law enforcement, fire, EMS, mental health, community programs, dispatch. Do you want someone in law enforcement overseeing the mental health programs? Do you want somebody in law enforcement overseeing fire and EMS? I have a background in fire investigations. I've investigated arson cases. So I think what you need there, it's not what I think, actually what I know is that you need somebody there that can handle all of those different aspects, because Broward Sheriff's Office is a public service agency, public safety agency. I mean, the building that houses the main core of BSO is the public safety building. So it's more than law enforcement. I also think that I don't have that bias. I haven't been, with that ingrained, aspect in my mind. And so I can see things from different perspectives to hopefully make the community relations better, to hopefully build trust for the community, and hopefully work with, community leaders. So, when I first started running, to be honest with you, it was a little bit annoying when someone asked me that question, because I would think instantly, why does it all automatically have to be a law enforcement officer? And then after hearing, things from the community and talking to the different community members, it's like, okay, I understand. This is what I bring to the table. And what I can tell you is that the very first sheriff of Broward County was not law enforcement. And there's been a number of other ones afterwards. And if you talk to anybody in the community, when the agency was run the best, it was run by someone who wasn't law enforcement. Because again, we need to address mental health big time in this community. And I don't want law enforcement doing it. I want real mental health professionals doing it.
Absolutely. And jumping onto that, and it's kind of a two-pronged question. I'm sure you've heard the phrase defund the police. And if you're not familiar with what it is, essentially it's reallocating funds. I think that moving in that direction where we reallocate the funds and the responsibility of the police so that they're not juggling all these different balls, so they can focus on solving crime, investigating fires, emergencies, things like that's in their wheelhouse, and let the professional social workers handle mental illness. Of course, for your own officers, if you were to win, you spoke into mental health as well. What are your thoughts on both defunding the police, for lack of a better phrase or word, and you've spoken to mental health? For your officers, future officers potentially, what would that look like, and how would that support the Black and brown community who have to deal with the officers on a regular basis?
Well, look, I'm against defunding the police. Because, when you hear that terminology used nowadays, a lot of people are using it as, let's defund the police. Let's totally get rid of law enforcement. Let's totally get rid of them. Let's don't have them in our communities anymore. I'm totally against that. Before COVID, okay, I had looked at the budget with several individuals in my advisory board. You could cut $30 to $40 million from the BSO budget and save the taxpayers money and not lose any services. Now, COVID has hit. We are in the state of Florida going to take a hit for the next 12 to 24 months. There's no doubt about it. So there's going to be some issues. I was, talking to someone in my advisory board about mental health. One of the things that I'd like to see is, for instance, if there's a homicide, law enforcement dealing with the family members of a homicide, it's probably not the best thing, right? I think you can have grief counselors come in and talk to those individuals, because law enforcement, like you said, do the investigation, find out, who committed the crime, who committed the homicide, and do that. But when it comes to grief counseling, I think it's something that can be handled a little differently. When it comes to mental health, I think mental health is two parts. I think mental health has to be addressed with the officers and the employees at BSO. And I think you also need to help deal with mental health in the local community, right? Right now, if you have someone on Broward Boulevard, homeless, intoxicated on drugs, nude, flipping out, the deputies have two choices. They can arrest them, or they can take them to the hospital, where the hospital looks at them, gets them stable, and then releases them. That doesn't help that individual, right? If that individual has a mental health problem, we need to work on addressing that. We can't ignore mental health anymore. It's been too long. And look, there's a lot of really good people that have mental health problems that lead to these breakdowns, that lead to these issues. And so if we can if we can address it before it gets to that, then law enforcement can be used to do other things. There are programs such as in Eugene, Oregon, where they use different types of individuals to go and respond to certain kinds of calls. If it's an emergency call, obviously you need law enforcement or fire and EMS. It depends on what the call is. But there are incidents where you can have grief counselors. There are incidents where you can have mental health counselors come and also address the issues. Because look, we have to build trust in our communities. We've got to build trust in BSO. A friend of mine told me not too long ago that when people drive through their community and they see a law enforcement officer, they either want to run, they want to hide, and it's not that they did anything wrong. It's just that they have this perception that it's not a good thing. I'd like to see it, you know, and I know this sounds silly because I said this the other day and the guy laughed at me, but I'd like to see it where the officer or deputy waves and the individual waves back, because we've built a relationship where we all trust one another. And I think that starts with the community and it starts with the agency.
It's certainly like that in certain communities where there is a rapport happening amongst the citizens and they don't have a fear of that. But it's not wholesale and across the board. One more thing in relation to transparency you were touching on, do you agree with having some sort of independent civilian board that investigates any mishandling or anything related to police abuse that could also be convened and selected by the Broward County Commission? They would, the people from the community be in charge of investigating.
Well, look, there's already review boards there. I know that that's a hot topic right now. I know the current administration doesn't want to talk about the current review boards, but they're there. They've been there for a long time. One of the things that's important, I feel like, is why you do want somebody from law enforcement on the review board is that you need someone there that's been in the training, that understands the training, understands the reactions, and you need someone there that's going to be honest about it. Tony has made some changes to the review board. I think those were political because he didn't like the outcome of some of the decisions made. The sheriff picks who's on the review board. So if you pick someone and you don't trust them, you shouldn't pick them. The review boards are important, but also, there's the court system. There's the judge and the jury. Those are independent review boards to some extent as well. And so, there are multiple things there. I don't agree with a complete separate civilian review board where there's nobody from law enforcement or the agency there or another agency, because I think you need to have someone on the board that's been through the training, been through the process. And I don't think that makes it biased. Some people say, well, then it's biased because you have a law enforcement officer on there. They look out for each other. I don't think so. Look, I trust human nature and I trust that we all want to do the right thing in life. There are some people that don't. And once we find out who those people are, we need to address those individuals. But for the most part, to answer your question is there's already those review boards there. It's just figuring out ways to tweak them and make them better. So anybody that says there aren't review boards, they don't know what they're talking about, or they're just telling you what you want to hear, which is not answering the question, so.
Understood. But as a follow-up, what I mean by not like obviously the sheriff or BSO gets to maintain their own review board. What I'm suggesting is separate and alongside of that review, that current review board is an independent civilian board that also any report that they find, any decisions that they make get sent back to Broward County Commission and say like an independent investigator that's all they do with the state attorney of the 17th Circuit is look at bad cops. So that because the issue we're finding is it falls into the lap of the state attorney, and then they have to decide if they're going to prosecute, and based on experience that this doesn't happen. So we need to if they're bad cops that are out there committing crimes, if you're saying you want to complete and have transparency and develop trust, then we have to, just like people get to pay for their crimes, so the bad cops. So what do you suggest on how to improve that situation if you don't believe in an independent review board?
Well, look, one of the things, going back to my answer a few moments ago, I think that there's been a breakdown historically in Broward County with the state attorney's office and the sheriff, the state attorney's office with other agencies. When you've had someone in a position for 40 plus years, there should be some kind of term limits, or there should be some kind of way to generate new energy there. Because if you speak to prosecutors that are there now, you don't have that. So yeah, I mean, there's been issues with the state attorney's office. There's a lot of great men and women that work there, but there hasn't been new blood. There will be now, and so you're going to have to hope. I mean, look, for the most part, and I haven't seen every one of the candidates for state attorney, but for the most part, I think they all agreed that they want to formulate some way to prosecute those that are the bad apples. You know, with having a completely independent board, that's something that comes from the county. You know, obviously the county has the jurisdiction to do what they can do. And so it's going to take some negotiations, I believe, between the sheriff's office and the county. But again, you know, I would like to see there be someone from law enforcement on the board, so to give a perspective, because, you know, I don't make split-second decisions in my life every day that count in my life, right? I'm behind a desk. The sheriff is going to be in an office behind a desk, moving paper, having conversations, negotiating contracts. The sheriff is not out there making split-second decisions for his life or someone else's life. But you do need somebody in that role for the board. So a completely independent review board, at this point, I don't agree with it. Hey, look, I'm open-minded. I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. And just because I have that position this second doesn't mean that statistics, conversations with the community, conversations with other officials, you know, doesn't mean that there is some kind of compromise. You know, I'm not the type of person that it's my way or the highway, because, you know, I don't know everything, and I'm not perfect. I make lots of mistakes. The goal here is
Mr. Wayne,
to
can I
make
ask you a
things
question?
better. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to read you a quote really quick, and I want you to tell me if you agree or disagree with this. This quote says, "It's not the truth that matters, but victory." Do you agree with that quote?
Well, I guess it depends on what the quote is. It's not the truth. No, look, the truth matters, right? The truth. I like to deal in the facts. I want to deal in the truth. The
Perfect.
truth matters. I like to win. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I coach baseball and I coach football. Okay, I coach youth sports. I like my teams to win, but we're not going to cheat to win.
Exactly.
So the truth matters.
So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. But that quote was actually, you're not going to like this, but you're going to be glad you answered the way you did. It's a quote from Hitler. It says, "It's not the truth that matters, but victory," which I think is very egregious. And I think the truth is always important. So with that being said, the reason I asked that question is because from the National Academy of Science, it says that according to per 100,000 people, African Americans are almost three times more likely to be killed by a law enforcement officer in America than any other nationality. Three times more likely than white people, but more likely than any other nationality to be killed by law enforcement. So with that being said, police brutality is a reality for African Americans. That the ultimate way that things get fixed is usually legislatively. It's laws. You know, it's just like a workplace. They put rules in place at work because they know if an employer can do it, more than likely he will do it. It's human nature. If they can work you for 50 cents, they'll work you for 50 cents because it's a for-profit company. And it's the same thing with human nature. People tend to do things wrong because they can do things wrong. So why do you or don't you support something like removing qualified immunity so that only the bad officers would be held accountable for, say, excessive force or killing a minority?
Well, look, I agree with qualified immunity. You know, it's interesting that the politicians bring that up and talk about it, but you never hear the politicians talking about removing qualified immunity from them, right? They don't talk about removing qualified immunity from the judges. They don't talk about from the legislatures, the people in state and federal. So that's an interesting thing. You know, why are the legislatures now? Why is it why are we have buzzwords, and why are we talking about it if we're not talking about it getting rid of it amongst everyone? Look, it goes back to what I said earlier. You know, law enforcement officers are there to make a split-second decision, and when you have to make that split-second decision, sometimes there are going to be mistakes. There's no doubt about it. But from a practical standpoint, let me ask you this. Look, in looking at the civil side of things, there are ways to file lawsuits. So most of the time they're going to sue, if there's a choice between suing like the chief of police of Coral Springs or the city of Coral Springs, they're going to sue the city of Coral Springs because of deeper pockets. There are avenues and ways to address those things. There's also, from a criminal standpoint, you do have the review boards. You do have the criminal justice system to prosecute those that have used excessive force in inappropriate ways. So with qualified immunity, though, it also goes to being able to have law enforcement officers that are actually willing to come and do the job, to show up. Because if you ask the law enforcement officers, one of my best friends is an air marshal. He's done it for 30 years or so. Well, not 30, maybe 20 or whatever years. And I had this conversation with him about him. He's Hispanic. He feels like at times that, he's been discriminated on, in certain communities in Broward County. And talking to him about qualified immunity, his thing is like, look, you got to have it because nobody's ever going to apply for the job. You're not going to have people applying for law enforcement. Qualified immunity was created, and I don't remember the year, I believe it was in the 60s, maybe the 70s, through the United States Supreme Court. And it was done in a way to be able to protect those that make mistakes in those split-second decisions. It doesn't keep individuals from filing lawsuits against agencies or the cities. So,
but Mr. Wayne,
I know it's a long-winded question. Yeah.
But Mr. Wayne, funny thing that you say that about the lawsuits is it doesn't prevent them from filing a lawsuit, but the success rate of the lawsuit is less than 25%. The reason is because once it's filed, if it's not already dismissed as soon as it gets to the courthouse, because usually it is dismissed by the courthouse 80% of the time, that was proven by a Yale law study in the state of Florida. But if it does get there, a lot of times in the summoning and judgment phase, when qualified immunity is actually used, the case is also dismissed. So ultimately what it boils down to is a success rate of less than 15% for individuals that file for a lawsuit against wrongful death for officers that may have had an on-duty police shooting. So the courts already rule in favor of the police officers, plus the way the law is designed, it says that the jurors and the people that look at the situation can only look at it through the perspective of the officer in the moment and not of the totality of the situation. So whether the officer was racially profiling or harassing or being judgmental because it's a woman or a gay person, or none of that, all that is justify why he shot the individual. So, or beat the individual up. So you can see how using a law like that is not fair, because it allows too much leeway for the officer to break the law ultimately, because if it's allowing them to do just that, break the law and then justify it because there's a loophole. So what I'm proposing is not just removing qualified immunity, but doing something in favor of the officer, is capping the lawsuit at $25,000. So saying that if there is a lawsuit filed to prevent frivolous lawsuits, that the maximum that an individual will be able to file against the officer specifically would be limited to $25,000. So it wouldn't be egregious, and then I'm sure they could work it out with the court system as far as how that payment system would work and stuff like that for like a wrongful death. Like Frank Ordonez, or whatever, that was shot, the UPS driver, his family has no legal recourse, and neither does a 50-year-old individual that was shot 3 car lengths up, that had nothing to do with the situation, because qualified immunity allows them to dismiss the situation and say, hey, look, we had no choice while on the line of duty. So I spoke to Frank Ordonez's brother, and they've had absolutely no legal recourse. They have nothing other than to put their son into the ground, unfortunately. So you can see how it's very important that we address qualified immunity, if not removing it completely, but at least, at the very least, amending it. Do you agree with at the very least amending qualified immunity?
Going to Frank Ordonez, was he the individual that was kidnapped inside the UPS truck?
Yeah, he was the one that was kidnapped.
But isn't it? And look, I have to go back and look. So I don't like talking about things that I don't know, because I don't want to say a misleading statement. But I thought he was dead before the shootout started. I don't know. It's an interesting fact. Look,
The video showed that Franco Dornez was shot by law enforcement because he was showed crawling out of the UPS vehicle from a helicopter camera as the shots were fired. So he was alive when the shooting happened, but after, obviously not.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously not after. Look, you know, the U.S. Supreme Court, when they came out with qualified immunity, had two prongs. They've already said, don't look at the first prong, look at the other prongs. I don't have it word for word in front of me, so you know I could misquote it. I also haven't read the jury instructions in a very long time for qualified immunity. I obviously know what it is. I know the principle of it. I stand behind it because I think that if you look at the purpose and the reason of qualified immunity, it's there because you have men and women making split-second decisions, you know, in times where it's their lives or someone else's lives. I think that, you know, you can address the qualified immunity from a number of different reasons, you know, ways. Look, if you have enough training and you've weeded out the bad apples and they're there, you have people making good judgment, it cuts down on those statistics. With regard to the cases that are dismissed on motion to dismiss or motions for summary judgment, you know, are those cases, you know, I haven't read the Yale study. I'll be more than glad to read it. But, you know, are those cases that are dismissed solely that were filed against the officer, or were they filed against the agencies or the counties or the municipalities? You know, so there's a lot to look at when you look at the studies. Overall, with regard to qualified immunity, in my opinion, I think it's important. I'm not a legislator. Look, if I wanted to be in the House or the Senate, I would have filled out a different application. I'd be running against a number of different men and women. I'm there to hopefully make Broward Sheriff's Office better for the community and create and increase public safety. Qualified immunity is a big issue, and I understand. But again, sometimes politicians use those terms as talking points, and they're kind of taking away from other issues. I hear what you're saying with regard to the $25,000. From a practical standpoint, as a lawyer, I don't know how that would work. I'd have to see how you drafted it. I don't, you know, I'd have to see it. I don't really understand your premise there. I think what you're saying is you can sue a law enforcement officer up to $25,000, and if you found out to be a frivolous lawsuit, I don't understand your premise. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to dodge your question. I just don't understand.
It could be something like what doctors have to get is their own coverage for malpractice. So something along those. And I apologize for his connection.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So what you're saying is, you know, because you have doctors in Florida now that are allowed to go. Well, that's different from a doctor though, because a doctor can go bare, right? They don't have to have malpractice insurance so long as they have certain amount of assets that are available in the event there's a lawsuit. I don't know what that number is. I think it's $250,000. That is different than the scenario that you have with qualified immunity. You know, the legislature changed that for doctors, and I don't know the studies. I don't do medical malpractice lawsuits. I have friends that do. But when you're talking about qualified immunity, it's apples and oranges to some degree. But I guess what you're saying is that Sean wants to have some kind of mechanism to where all law enforcement officers have to have some kind of insurance.
No, the reason I say limited to $25,000 is to protect the officer from getting excessively sued. So, for example, if qualified immunity is removed, then the individual will be able to file a lawsuit against police officers and the police department, but there would be no limit on to what they can sue them for or how much. So you don't want it to be excessive. So that would protect the officer from, say, getting $100,000, $200,000 lawsuit from the individual's family. That's why I said that. But my other question to you is, as far as qualified immunity goes, if you don't want to remove the entire law of qualified immunity, would you be okay with amending it to where it says that if the officer violates an individual's civil rights or Fourth Amendment rights, that they would not be able to use qualified immunity?
I don't want to sound argumentative, and I'm certainly not trying to argue with you, but again, I think that if they're looking at removing qualified immunity for law enforcement, then remove it for everybody. Remove it for the judges, remove it for the legislatures, remove it for everybody in government. Maybe that's an answer. I haven't looked at it. Maybe that's an answer. Maybe that way, you know, the legislatures get, you know, come up with alternatives like you're suggesting, because to target law enforcement officers who make those split-second decisions, I don't agree with. You know, I don't agree with violating someone's civil rights. I don't agree with that. You're gonna, in my administration, in my agency, you're going to treat everybody the same. Doesn't matter, sex, race, whatever. You're going to treat everyone right. And if you don't, then you're done. There's no middle ground there. We're not going to. I don't want racist cops on any spectrum working for me. But with qualified immunity, I just, at this point, you know, I don't see a mechanism or an alternative that still gives the law enforcement officers the protection that they need for the split-second decisions. Look, if they make bad calls, right? If they violate someone's civil rights, there are avenues to file those lawsuits. You know, there are avenues to file those complaints.
So are you saying that if you become sheriff, that you can guarantee that no officer is going to violate someone's civil rights and get away with it in court, or that they will not be allowed to use qualified immunity? Because that what you're saying is, like, after your retraining, that there won't be an officer on the Broward County Sheriff's Office that will violate someone's civil rights or Fourth Amendment rights without a law. Like, there's no, you know, law or anything that's going to hold them accountable. Your retraining is going to somehow prevent all officers from doing that. Is that it? How is that possible?
Well, look, the laws do hold them accountable, right? I know I'm not perfect, and I know that there are going to be individuals that work for any job, right? I see things, I'm a very nonpartisan person, right? I see things as good or evil. That's it. That's how I look at life, right? And so with regard to qualified immunity and with regard to civil rights, is there are laws in place. There are mechanisms in place that can be triggered. But the men and women of Broward Sheriff's Office are going to know day one that we're going to treat people with respect and treat everyone equally. If you don't, then we're going to address that situation. Can I guarantee you 100% that of the 6,000 people that work there, one person is not going to step out of line in the 4 years that I'm at that agency? I can't guarantee you that, but I can guarantee you that if they do, they're going to be addressed and handled. I'm not going to be a roadblock to a bad cop being prosecuted. I'm not going to be a roadblock to a family getting transparency when a bad cop does something they shouldn't do. But also, you know, there are rules in place. There's also the officers, you know, rights and duties. There are they take an oath. So look, with qualified immunity, I just don't see another alternative right now that's been proposed that protects the men and women in uniform enough, other than what's currently there. Look, here's the thing with our system. Here's the thing with America. Our system is not perfect. It will never be perfect, but we should all, as human beings, work to make it better every day. And having conversations with people in the community like you, with leaders like you guys, it helps me understand, and it helps me figure out ways to make things better for BSO. I do think, though, on a national level and a state level, that there needs to be conversations in a legislative format to fix some of the problems that we have. Unfortunately, right now we're so polarized that nothing is getting done, and it's very frustrating.
So are you saying?
This is Melody, the president of Black Lives Now. I just wanted to quickly,
Hi, Melody.
because we've had a lot of conversations about qualified immunity, and we've sort of gone around and round with it. And some of the things that you've said seems like you agree with us on a lot of topics, but the buzzword is what throws you off. For instance, where you want to cut the budget of BSO and reallocate funds for mental health, and you have a standpoint that mental health is very important for officers and the community. which I applaud you because I absolutely agree with you. And I think that with a lot of agencies, mental health is not a big enough priority. They sort of, do some training and hand them a gun and badge and hope for the best. My ex-husband is a deputy sheriff, and he in the sheriff's office. And I know from personal experience of being a Leo wife what they go through, and that there is zero support from a officer to officer standpoint, and it's still a huge stigma in agencies of whether you get support or not. The agency themselves usually offer an EAP program, which is a free 8-session program for officers who seek out the mental health support, but it's a very hush-hush thing, and officers don't feel comfortable sharing or going. So I think that that's going to be a huge hurdle for you if you become sheriff. But why I brought that up from the beginning of your conversation is because a lot of the things you mentioned are exactly the platform of defund the police. So the fact that you have an issue with the terminology of defund the police is understandable based on your party affiliation and based on where you stand. But the reason they say defund is really reallocation. And I think that you actually agree with a lot of the points of reallocation, of cutting some of the money from BSO's budget, putting that into social workers, mental health workers, etc., and taking some of the load off of the police officers so that they can go back to the time when they were peace officers, where they wave to their community and the community waves back. So I really encourage you, I know that we're running out of time now, but I encourage you to look past some of these talking points like qualified immunity, the title, and look at the fact that amending that law of qualified immunity so that it takes away the officer's ability to overwrite someone's rights, their Fourth Amendment rights or civil rights, etc., and it still protects them in the split-second decision-making process. I think that you would find that you actually align very much with some of the core belief systems that Black Lives Now has. This is why we had this second conversation with you, because in our first conversation, we got a lot of great feedback from you, realizing that you actually could be a good candidate for sheriff with some of your belief systems, but you might be hung up on some of these key words. So I would encourage you to look past those and look at, some of the things that we're trying to do legislatively, and perhaps have another conversation with us, because these things are super important for our communities, especially the community you're looking to lead as a sheriff. It's a very diverse community, and it's been hit with a lot of excessive force complaints, a lot of officer issues, like Sean has brought up. So I know that we're needing to close up right now, but I just wanted to give you a few minutes to give us an idea. If you were to be elected, what could you do differently? What can you offer our diverse community, Black Lives Now, as some offer of support in what we're looking to do?
Yeah, sure. So look, first of all, I don't know why this position is a partisan position. I don't know why this position is Republican or Democrat. It makes zero sense. If any of you are driving, Sean, if you're driving right now and someone pulls you over and they ask you, are you Republican or Democrat? I certainly hope they don't do that, right? That's completely and totally improper. With regard to the budget aspect, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm probably saying the word wrong. For some reason, that word always gets me. But you understand what I'm saying. I'm conservative when it comes to money. I believe if you look at that budget, you can cut that budget and give some of that money back to the men and women in Broward County. I do think mental health is a huge, huge problem in Broward County. If you look at whether it's school shootings or youth violence, why are we doing all this active duty training? Why aren't we trying to prevent these incidents before they actually happen? Because if you're implementing active shooter training, more than likely someone's already been shot and killed. Let's try to address it before then. And I understand, the workings of BSO, and I want the public to help understand that it's more than law enforcement. And law enforcement, it's there, it has a vital role for community safety, public safety. But we also need to address things from, like I said, a mental health standpoint. I can't say that enough. And I'll either win or lose the election based on standpoints like that. But whoever takes over, they've got to address the community as a whole to build the relationships, and they've got to address mental health. The reason I'm against defunding the police is because I hear what you're saying with buzzwords, but when I hear it in the media so much, I hear it taken as we're taking away money from the police, we're disbanding the police, and we're getting rid of police officers. That is not, I don't support that at all. Please don't misunderstand anything I said. I don't understand at all. But I do understand.
We don't either. We're not anti-police.
Okay.
And we absolutely don't believe in disbanding the police. So that's why I wanted to make that clear with you, that it's more about reallocation of funds.
Well, talking about mental health, there's a program that was started in the Veterans Administration, the VA hospital over in Tampa, and it deals with PTSD, because a lot of the mental health issues that first responders have are PTSD related. I'm not saying they all have PTSD, but when you're talking about your husband and mental health and reporting and talking to people, those are the things that come up. People worry. There's this stigma that, if I talk, then I'm going to be fired if I mention this stuff. We've got to get away from that. Like I said, first responders see the worst of the worst, the bad of the bad, the baddest of the baddest. And so they need outlets to be able to talk. And I want to encourage that. We're in a society where people are like, I'm this tough guy and I can't show emotion. Come on, it's 2020. It's time to be able to have conversations, be able to talk about how you feel about things and explain things to make, you healthier, your family healthier. If you're a wife of a first responder, you know how it is. I mean, those guys have bad days. They feel like they don't have the support. And look, the community needs to know that we've got to have change. We talk about it all the time, but we don't do anything about it.
Can I ask you one last question, Mr. Wayne? Before we wrap this up, I'm just going to ask you one last question. It's pretty easy.
Okay.
What do you think is the reason, or why do you think is the primary reason that the Broward County jail system is 70% African American? What would you say is a factor or a primary factor in the reasoning on why the jail system has over 50% African Americans? It's literally 70%, but what do you think the reasoning is behind that?
Well, look, I don't think that there's one main reason. I think it's a lot of different reasons in Broward County. I think that, first and foremost, we have leaders there that don't take responsibility, right? The past two administrations, you ask them, they will not take any self-responsibility for anything, right? A leader has to take responsibility. There has to be a culture change in Broward County, because you've got to change the culture of the agency, and you've got to make the agency, look, let me say this. There's a lot of people that work at Broward Sheriff's Office that don't live in Broward County. I got asked that question about fire and EMS, like why are there not enough minorities working at fire and EMS? That goes to the community as well. We've got to address some of these things with the community and at home and at the agency. So there's multiple reasons why that we have these issues in Broward County. It's not just one. It's not one thing. It's not one piece fits all, or however that phrase goes.
So you're
but
saying
what we
that
need to
racial
do is,
profiling. So you're saying racial profiling is not a factor in the reason why it's 70% African American.
I can tell you, I don't work at BSO right now, but if somebody's racial profiling and they're picking on certain individuals just solely because of race, nothing else, that's not right. You got to treat everybody equally. You got to treat everybody fairly. So that's it. I mean, look, my stance is very simple. It's very simple. You break the law, then whatever the law is, if it means you get arrested, you get arrested. If you don't break the law, then you should be left alone. There's no reason why we should be targeting.
Does that go for officers as well?
Yeah, if they're a look, we didn't even talk about this today. And this is not popular in Broward County whatsoever. And it causes me a lot of heat. On day one, my administration will form a public corruption unit. And if you break a law in Broward County, I don't care who you are. If you break a law in Broward County, we're prosecuting you, whether you're a politician, whether you're whatever you are. So yeah, anybody, if a law enforcement officer is breaking the law, then he needs to be held accountable.
I know many officers who were fired, and because of the unions, they were able to get their jobs back. So I hope that you're able to, as an attorney or in the past of your legal experience, I hope that you're able to turn that around as well.
Well, look, there's one thing I can tell you from being a lawyer in the community of Broward County since 2004. There are a lot of really good lawyers and a lot of bad lawyers. There are a lot of lawyers that give other lawyers really bad names. And it's just like that for law enforcement. And so we've got to be able to address those issues. You know, one of the things that I hate worse than anything else is a bad lawyer giving all the other lawyers bad names in town, just like cops don't like other bad cops. I hear what you're saying, and taking, you know, from my standpoint and helping renegotiate contracts and helping look at things with an unbiased eye, I think I'm the perfect fit. I think we're at a point in Broward County right now where take my platform, look at it, right? I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm not always going to agree with everything you say. Go ahead.
Mr. Wayne, you're saying you're unbiased, but you're not even willing to acknowledge that racial profiling and racism is a factor in the mass incarceration of African Americans in your community. That would make you biased towards police officers. Am I wrong?
I'm not saying that they're look, Gregory Tony the other day said basically all cops are racist. I disagree with that statement. I don't think all cops are racist. Does racism exist in America? 100%. 100%. That's on me, that's on you, and that's on everybody in this panel to make sure our kids and our grandkids and those under us don't see things based on color. They're neutral. That's on society as a whole. Does racism exist? 100%. Should it exist? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're in 2020. You know, but it's here. And we got to be able to
acknowledge racism in the workplace, though. How can you hold the employees accountable for committing a discrimination or racist acts? Because you ultimately would be the boss of your employees if you become sheriff. So you would have to acknowledge that some employees, you may not the majority of them, but like there may be some one or two employees that may be biased or discriminating against other individuals. And in order to identify that, you would have to acknowledge that it even exists or that it is a factor, because there's no way possible that a jail system can consist of 70% of one race, especially African Americans, when they are the minority inside of your county. So that is a huge factor, and your platform is you're unbiased. So the bias seems to be based on your actions is that you're more biased towards police officers than being unbiased, across the board. Do you plan on addressing the racial issues when you become sheriff, or if you become sheriff?
Look, like I said to you the other day, I can't tell you the statistics of who's in Broward County now and why, right? I'm not the sheriff. That's something that Sheriff Tony or Sheriff Israel should have addressed in the last 6+ years. Israel, then the 1920s for Gregory Tony. What I can tell you is, under my administration, is we are not going to have racist cops. If we find that you're racist, it's no place to work in Broward County. You're not going to work for our agency. And that goes for it doesn't matter what race you are. If you're racist to any other race, that's not right. We're here to treat everybody fair. And Sean, can I guarantee you that everybody's going to treat everybody fair every day? No. But what I can tell you, though, it starts at the top. It starts with a leader who's taking responsibility. It starts with a leader who changes the culture in the agency. You change the behavior and the beliefs of those in the agency, and you can get better. We can do better. We're not doing all that we can do now. And my goal is to every day make Broward County safer and better for all the citizens and not just one group of citizens.
Thank you, sir. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you sitting down with us. I hope you didn't feel too grilled, but this is an important year, and these are important topics, particularly for our constituency and our members. We're out here fighting because of what we've seen on TV, and I want to say that, like Melody was saying earlier, I feel like you are in alignment with a lot of what we're saying, and maybe the language is like tripping you up. But you know, if you were to win, we hope to partner with you in the future on making this county the example of the rest of the country.
So let me leave you all with this. If all four of us sat in the room and we all discussed what we believe in life and what we want our kids to have, or our futures to have, or our families to have, I guarantee you we're all more alike than the news or anybody else would give us credit for, right? We all have different backgrounds. We've all come from different locations, different places in the country, different places in the world. But at the end of the day, I believe people want to do the right thing. I don't, you know, there are some people that are racist, that want to be racist, that want to cause problems. But for the most part, I believe if you look at the cross section of America, we all want our families to succeed. We all want to do better. We all want our neighbors to be safe. And we all want similar things in life. There are going to be some things, you know, that we disagree with, from some social policy issues here and there. But for the most part, I guarantee you, all of us, everybody in Broward County, 90+% of us, all agree and want the same things in life. So one of the things that we have to do as human beings is stop letting people divide us. Stop letting people tell us, they give us labels to make us not like one another. Because if you do that, then the bad people win. You know, you guys have been very respectful for me, or to me. It's hard questions, but look, I'm applying for a very hard, difficult job that is in a broken agency with the morale's at an all-time low. If I don't have people like you, if I don't have groups like you, organizations like you asking me those hard questions, I can't make the agency better. Because I don't want to go status quo, and I don't want to go I don't want to keep down the same path. I want to bring BSO to something where the rest of the country looks at and says, okay, that's a model that we want to go after. That's what we want our agency to look like.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you again for joining us, and good luck in your campaign. August 18th is the primary, so make sure you register to vote. If you have your mail-in ballot, send it in. If you're going in person, be careful, wear a mask, socially distance. And we want to thank you for joining us on our first episode of the Roundtable, sir. Good luck.
Thank you all so much. Stay safe. God bless.
Take care.